Let's honor Elizabeth Hickok Robbins Stone as our Pioneer Laureate. In 1862, she and her husband packed their covered wagon and made the move from Minnesota to Colorado, down the South Platte River. After spending 2 years in Denver, operating a restaurant and hotel in what is currently Union Station, they made their way north to a U.S. Army outpost named Camp Collins, where she was a major founder in Fort Collins. Let's watch to learn more.
Her life was just a series of firsts. She was a groundbreaker.
Known as the mother of Fort Collins, Elizabeth Hickok Robbins Stone is considered one of the most beloved figures in northern Colorado's history.
She was born in 1801 in Connecticut, so she was a child when Thomas Jefferson was president.
And she ended up in New York. She was wed to a man named Hickok Robbins, and in that union they had 8 children.
After her first husband died in 1852, Elizabeth returned to the East Coast and then moved to Minnesota.
And there she met a man named Louis Stone, which she would eventually marry in 1857.
And she made her way out to Denver, where she had a little hotel and restaurant, actually where Union Station is today. And then she was invited to come up to this little outpost in northern Colorado.
Elizabeth Stone was an early resident here in Fort Collins, moving with her husband in 1864 to Camp Collins, it was called then.
And she became the cook for the officers' mess. They built her a cabin, a 2-story cabin right in the, at the edge of the fort. And it was the first civilian building built here. And she was the first woman to come here. To consider that she's already in her 60s by the time she undertakes this job at the fort. And they all became such good friends that they quit calling her Elizabeth and started calling her Auntie.
And the fort was only in business for just a few years. It was decommissioned in 1867. So after that, people kind of dispersed, but she stayed.
Her next iteration was as a businesswoman, perhaps the first businesswoman in Fort Collins.
She started running a hotel out of her cabin. She had a business partner. At that point, her husband actually had died. Louis Stone had died. So she had the hotel. She started a grist mill in Fort Collins called Lindell Mills. She started the first brick factory, the brick kiln. So she just had her hands in all sorts of businesses.
Elizabeth Stone was known for her boundless energy, often showing up her much younger partygoers.
4 generations of her family joined together for her 81st birthday, and they had the party at the Masonic Hall. The young men decided that they would dance her down, which means they would dance her until she said, "I have to sit down, I can't dance anymore." It never happened. She just kept dancing.
A long-time business leader, visionary, and then also importantly, a very strong woman who campaigned for women's right to vote. And interestingly enough, after she lived for 29 more years after her husband, and 28 years later, at the age of 94, she was able to vote in her first municipal election.
She cast her ballot and she came out and said, "I've waited a lifetime to do this."
She's buried at the Grandview Cemetery in Fort Collins. Her cabin is preserved here at Library Park in Old Town.